Hello and welcome to this lecture. Today we are going to discuss bacillary dysentery, and I'm going to start with one of the systematic review I found online, and that article I found is very interesting. So let's discuss that information. So the paper title is the patient presenting with acute dysentery, a systematic review. And this paper is very important because this is a systematic review published between 2000 to 2011 and discussing about the frequency of occurring of the dysentery. So I'm going to show you some important things, like you can see that the non-infection causes, and they mention main thing is that because of the anal fissure or inflammatory bowel disease, juvenile polyps, or in adults it could be occur because of the amyloidosis of the intestine or arteriovenous malfunction or colorectal cancer. They mention so many things. Then the etiological agents, there are so many etiological agents. They mention Shigella, Salmonella, Campylobacter, and then they also mention that estimate annual mean in numbers, and how we detect that these all agents they mention in detail. You can read this paper. So I found this paper is really interesting to share with you. And they also mentioned the frequency of the bloody diarrhea illness in all sample positive for etiological agents. So this paper is good. You can read this systematic review, especially for this acute dysentery. And it is the type of dysentery that is known as a severe form of shigellosis. Causative organisms are so many, but I mentioned the main one like Shigella sonnei, Shigella flexnei, Shigella dysentery. So there are so many, as you see in the article. You can read it. Shigellosis is a gram-negative bacteria encapsulated, so it means that it is not covered. It is not in the form of capsule form. Non-motile, it means they have no tail, and it can grow in anaerobic conditions. The main common this species is responsible for the bloody diarrhea. More than 165 million people cases are reported worldwide each year, and they found that the presence of several organisms as many as 10 raised per 9 in each gram of stool has been found, and fecal oral route or contaminated water and food will be the common site that is responsible for transmission of this disease. In the United States and Europe, it is usually in daycare centers or migrant workers or travelers to developing countries. So it is not commonly in US, because this is a disease of the developing countries, not in the developed countries. So usually occur in poor conditions or poor sanitary conditions, and that occur in children younger than age of 5. So it means if patient is a young kid, a young child, it could affect more than that. Pathogenesis is, we know, need to see that the Shigella microorganisms, they are resistant to harsh environment, and they are taken by the intestine by the M cells or microphore cells, and then they proliferate intercellularly, escape into the lamina propria, phagocytosed by macrophages, and then they can induce apoptosis or cellular death. So because of the inflammatory response, they are responsible uh, for infections. They can damage the epithelia and then can affect the intestinal lumen, where they can affect on the colonic epithelial cells, and which is the preferred site for the invasion they can affect. So this is a picture of the mucosa and submucosa lamina propria. We already discussed several times before. We are not going to discuss again. And they are affecting, actually, again, their thing is, and they can affect the GIT, and they can affect the lumen of the intestine. So we know this thing before. The prominent location is left colon, but in the ileum also involved. Why? Because of the presence of the M cells, and the M cells, because they take these microorganisms can be taken by the M cells. So what will happen that it can affect the mucosa and can cause hemorrhage and ulceration, and pseudomembrane are may be present in the case. The clinical features consist of 1 week of diarrhea, fever, abdominal pain. The watery diarrhea progresses, and then it may persist into dysenteric phase that can long for 1 month. Uh, for diagnosis, we need to see the patient's stool for the confirmation of the infection, and if the microorganism continue to grow, then it can lead to complication like reactive arthritis, urethritis, or conjunctivitis. So thank you so much for today's lecture. Hope to see you again.